What if feeling good, truly, deeply good, wasn't something you had to wait for, but something you could practice every single day? What if the path to better relationships, more creativity, greater health, and lasting wealth started with how you feel? My next guest says it does, and his step-by-step approach will show you how. Today on the Pauline Chilton Show, I'm thrilled to welcome Fletcher Ellingson, author of the powerful book, The Practice of Feeling Good, a book I've not only read, but loved for its actionable insights and radically transformative ideas. Fletcher's message is simple, but profound. You already have everything you need within you to live a confident, connected, joyful life. Through neuroscience, emotional intelligence, and practical tools, he shows us how to retrain our brains and rewire our beliefs so we can stop living in fear or self-doubt and start taking powerful, trust-building action in every area of life. Fletcher has coached thousands, hosted a regional TV show, and led a podcast for over 6 years. But his biggest passion? Helping people recognize their own inner superpowers and use them to feel good, lead better, and live with purpose. This conversation goes deep. We talk courage, trust, neuroplasticity, and the power of radical responsibility. So if you've been waiting for a sign to finally feel good, this is it. Hi, Fletcher. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Thanks for having me on, Pauline. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Thank you. First of all, before we dive into the questions, I want to say I loved your book.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I do want to talk about your book because I truly believe it's a must-read for anyone who's ready to shift how they think and feel in order to start living with more joy, clarity, and confidence.
Absolutely. And I believe that is possible for everyone if they take to heart the lessons of the book, if they really put in the effort, right? I mean, it's always going to take effort. But I believe that there are tools in this book that, if followed, will make a difference in your life.
In the first chapter, you talk about Cesar Millan and how he helps dogs rewire their nervous systems by creating new patterns.
Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar with the idea of programming, how would you describe what that means in terms of human behavior and what it actually looks like in our day-to-day lives?
Great question. So what Cesar does is he helps dogs, basically reprogram their brains. And he does it in such a radical way. He doesn't point out the negative behavior, right? What he does is continually reinforce the positive and desired behavior for the dog. And this is what really good dog trainers do. They're very proficient at rewarding the desired behavior. That's completely opposite of what we humans usually do. We are constantly pointing out what's not working in our life. We're getting upset about what's not working in our life. We're worrying about what's not working in our life. We're stressing about it. We're going into overwhelm about it. So in fact, what we're doing is bringing greater attention to it and amplifying that which we don't actually want. So the very behaviors and results that we don't want in our life are the ones we're practiced at amplifying, right? So that's just that insight right there. If we can get present to that's what we've been trained to do. Now, it's not good, bad, right, or wrong, right? So I'm not saying shame on you. I'm not saying that at all. I mean, and because I'm lumping myself right in there with the rest of us, right? This is what I was really trained to do. I was masterfully practiced. You know how they say, the old expression, takes about 10,000 hours to become a master or something, right? Oh, I've got my 10,000 hours in overwhelm, in stress, in worry, in insecurity. I'm a master. And so what I've been working on is kind of unwinding all of that. And the best way to do it is to really get clear about what is it that I do want? How is it that I want to feel? What's the outcome that I would like to experience? And then begin to focus all my efforts and energies and conversations around that. Now, is it easy? No. Does it take practice? Yes. But is it worth it? 100%.
Absolutely. Once somebody recognizes that they're running an old or unhelpful program,
Yeah.
what are some practical steps to begin changing that programming?
Mm-hmm.
And can you share a story of someone who did this work and created a real shift?
Yeah, I can. So I'm gonna use myself as an example. I used to have a mindset around money that and the mindset was, and when I say mindset, this is such a buzzword, right? Everybody's talking about mindset. I want to get clear about what mindset is. Okay, it's because mindset is not an opinion. If we reverse those words, set mind, okay? It's a set mind, meaning it's not going to change. It's set. If you consider it like it's set in concrete. Okay, so what is a mindset or a set mind? It's a set of beliefs, decisions, and attitudes that help me make sense of the world around me and of myself. Okay, and we don't just have one mindset. We have lots of mindsets. We have lots of set minds. We have a set mind around our political views, our religious views. We have a set mind around sex, around money, around parenting. Each one of those has a very distinct set of beliefs, decisions, and attitudes. And each time that topic comes up, Pauline, it's not like we have to ask ourselves, like, gosh, what do I believe about that? No. It's a set mind. So the mind sees, oh, we're going to talk about religion, and that program starts to run. It runs without your permission, without your consent, and without your approval. These words that come out of your mouth, they're straight from the program. We don't have to think very hard about them. We're practiced at it. Now, so years ago, I've always been an entrepreneur and love entrepreneurship, but I also had a mindset that money was challenging to get. Money was going to be a struggle. Only a certain type of person could have access to money. They could only certain people could be rich, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I was a hard worker, but I had this mental cap. I had a mindset, right? And it's so interesting because I was pedaling like crazy towards those targets, right? All the while, I had a belief that they were unattainable. And so if you looked at my bank account, you would have seen the results that were in alignment with my mindset, right? They were never very high, frequently in the red. You know, it was not a good situation. When I began really diving deep into what a mindset is and uncovering my beliefs about it, I had the opportunity then to radically change it. So I had to rewrite that story. Now, so I rewrote the story about what was possible. Okay. And so I realized that, oh, that could be me. And in fact, I remember the moment that the light bulb went on was when I went to Las Vegas for the first time. I was on a business trip. I'd never been to Vegas. I'd never been to any of these types of casinos. And I went in there and I saw people of just from all over the world, of all different net worths, of all different backgrounds. And I realized that money that they're winning does not care one iota about the history of that person. It will go into anyone's pocket. And that light bulb went off and I was like, that could be me, right? And so I began rewriting my story and I realized that, oh, wealth is always circulating. It's always circulating and I can be in the loop or out of the loop. And I chose at that moment to be in the loop. I made a decision, I'm going to be in that loop of wealth circulation. And I began, and knowing what I knew then, I thought, I have to build up evidence. I have to find evidence to support this new belief. Otherwise, this is going to be like a balloon that fizzles, right? And all the air goes out of it. So I began looking at all the people in my life who did have money, what they were doing. And I got curious. I started learning. I started educating myself. And I remember when I bought my first share of Ford stock, I opened up an E-Trade account and I said, well, I'm going to take the actions that other people, of those people who have the outcomes that I want, I'm going to follow their example and I'm going to start taking actions. And so I bought my first share of Ford stock back then. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in the investing game now. Wow, right? And so I began just taking these baby steps, putting a little bit of money each side a month for my safety net and then for our car fund. I remember people would get new cars and I'd be like, how? One of my friends got a truck and he mentioned that he paid cash for it. This blew my mind because I thought the only way to buy a new car is to have car payments for the rest of your life, right? I just thought that's the way everybody did it. But he understood about how money worked, about how to save money. And so I began a car fund. And all the while, I'm building evidence. And I'm seeing that evidence. Oh, I'm actually doing it. I'm not just reading about it and thinking about it and wishing, I'm actually doing it. And so I'm constantly doing this validation along the way. Validation is super important. And it's all done through language, which we'll get to later. But so eventually what happens is you begin to build a new attitude. Remember, a mindset is a set of beliefs, decisions, and attitudes. So I made a decision that I could be in that in that circulation of wealth. I changed my attitude and the belief, and I began like self-validating all of those things until pretty soon I actually had a completely different mindset around wealth. Now, I want your listeners to hear one thing. If we do not put in new programming, the brain only has one option to run. It can only run the old mindset. You can't get rid of that old mindset. Okay. I don't want people trying to get rid or delete that mindset. That's a waste of energy. At that point, you're just bringing more energy to the old mindset. What we must do is we must set up a secondary program so that the brain now has an option. It can run this new program. But if there's no new program to run, you're doomed to run that old program over and over and over again.
That makes so much sense. When I was reading your book, I was thinking about how one of the core threads that runs throughout your book is this powerful idea: what you focus on, you feel.
Yes.
It sounds simple, but it can be life-changing. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because what you just hit on is probably one of the most fundamental teachings of the book, and also the biggest thing that can make a difference in our lives. You know, we've all seen this on social media. What you focus on, you feel. We've seen the meme, we've heard it, right? But what does it actually mean? Well, what it means is wherever you place your focus, you're going to have an emotional reaction to that. And the best example I can give you is if we go to a movie. Okay. We go into there, we sit down, we got our popcorn and our beverage, and the lights go down and the show comes up. And let's say it's like Mission Impossible or something, where it starts off with a bang. I mean, it's massively intense, right? And there's like loud noises, there's cars racing, there's guns going off, maybe there's people shouting, there's a lot of running. It's high intensity action. You're not relaxed sitting back in your seat, breathing deeply. At this point, your body's tense. In fact, if you were hooked up to a heart rate monitor, you would probably see that your heart is beating faster than it normally would. Okay. You might even be perspiring a little bit. Your body is having an emotional and physiological reaction to what you are focused on, because, and here's the $1 million answer here is, your brain has no choice. It must create a chemical reaction called an emotion. It must create a chemical reaction that aligns with the story you're focused on. Now, in that 2-hour movie or 3-hour movie, in the course of this last Mission Impossible movie, in that 3-hour movie, you may have experienced a wider range of emotions than you normally do in an entire week. Okay? And different emotions, because when you're watching that, you're not fearful, you're not overwhelmed, you're not stressed. I mean, you're experiencing some high, intense emotions, but it's not those disempowering emotions. But it's a wide variety of emotions in 3 hours. And here's the thing that blows me away. What are you responding to? It's simply light being shown on a screen. This is not real. It's not even real. This is light on a screen, and your brain is creating this incredible chemical reaction over and over and over again.
And it feels real.
It feels real to the brain.
You cry.
Yes.
You're going along this chase with the characters, or
yes,
whatever they're going through. It feels like you're there with them, right?
Exactly. And we all love a superhero, or we love the story of like when someone, breaks through their fear and goes and steps into courage, right? We love those movies. We want to literally stand up and cheer. And sometimes we do in the movie theaters, right? Where people will clap, right? We're having such an intense reaction, and that reaction puts us into action. We take action based on the emotions that we're feeling. So imagine if we could create our emotional states on demand. Most people they feel like their emotions descend upon them. Like, hey, Pauline, what's going on? Oh, I don't know, Fletcher. I'm just in a funk today. Oh, well, what's going on? Oh, I don't know. I just woke up in a funk. Oh, okay. Well, is there anything I can do? No, it'll pass. It'll pass. And then a few hours later, I was like, hey, Pauline, you feeling any better? Yeah, I feel a lot better now. Oh, why? What happened? I don't know. It left. The gloom left. What happened was there was something we were focused on in the morning. Maybe we couldn't identify it, maybe not, but there was something we were focused on. It could have been a dream, could have been something that we knew we were going to have to do that day that didn't excite us. But there's a story that we're focused on, and the brain has no choice. It must create an emotion that goes along with what you're focused on. And then later on, that funk left. Why? Because you began focusing on a different type of story. So this leads us to the golden opportunity. If it's really up to us how we feel, like we can actually influence it. Of course, it'll take lots of practice. But if we really can influence our emotions, then it gets exciting. Now we get to ask, well, Pauline, what emotions do you want to feel more of during the day? Do you want to feel safer? Do you want to feel more connected? Do you want to feel inspired? Do you want to feel eager? Right?
Right.
Do you want to feel loving? Do you want to feel kind? Do you want to feel hopeful, optimistic, willing? If you want to feel more of that, then we just have to get curious. What's the story that I need to begin to focus on? Because all I have to do is direct my focus towards that, and the brain takes care of the emotion. Isn't that cool?
That is cool. Because I was thinking about that. Like, we all have these moments where we just get completely thrown off emotionally.
Yes.
People get triggered, they get upset.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what would you recommend someone do to find their footing again and maybe even turn that moment into something more powerful?
Good question. So one of the things I do, and I have asked my wife and I have a great relationship. And one of the things I always say, like, hey, babe, if you see that I get triggered, will you please remind me that this is an opportunity? And so we literally use that language. And we don't use it like in a sarcastic way. Well, it looks like an opportunity, Fletcher. It's not like that. It's like, hey, babe, this looks like an opportunity to practice. It's an opportunity to practice influencing my emotional state. So when I get triggered, I'll frequently say to myself, oh my gosh, okay, here's an opportunity to practice. I'm feeling really upset. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling impatient. I'm feeling frustrated. A great place to practice this, and I actually have my clients do this, is when they're driving. Because Pauline, when we get behind the wheel, would you agree? Oh boy, another side of us can show up pretty quickly.
Oh,
right?
That's
all of a sudden we're like free with who we're going to judge or give the finger to, or like, whatever it is. People become just really quite verbal and upset and frustrated when they're driving. They become really impatient. So for me, that's one of the things I challenge my clients to, is like, practice in the car. Someone cuts you off, it's an opportunity to practice. Practice what? Well, being present, extending grace, being kind, coming up with, what you do is you come up with, because they'll say, well, Fletcher, you expect me to be gracious with that jerk? He just cut me off. What's a story that we could focus on? I don't know, maybe he didn't see me? Yeah, well, that's one option. What else? Maybe they're, and maybe they're in a hurry and there's an emergency. Yeah. How about, or people who are going underneath the speed limit, right? Maybe they've got hot coffee between their legs. Maybe they were in an accident last week and maybe they're jittery. Maybe they have a hurt neck and they couldn't turn all the way to see you. I don't know what it is, but we can practice coming up with stories. Now, some of my clients say this, but Fletcher, you're just making up a story. Exactly. Because that's what we're always doing. We are always making up a story about any situation that's in front of us. And then the brain creates an emotion. So what we want to get practiced at doing is creating kind stories. What I want to do in my life, Pauline, is I just want to influence the frequency of the world toward kindness. Mm-hmm. That's what I want to do with my life. I want to be a resource, a source of kindness so that there's less suffering in the world. If we all oriented ourselves, our stories toward kindness, towards believing in people, giving people the benefit of the doubt, whoa, what a difference. It all comes down to our story.
Yeah, that's so deep. You said in your book, your values don't mean jack, which definitely caught my attention. What's behind that bold statement? And how does that show up in the results people actually get in life?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So I've worked with lots of companies, and companies usually or frequently will spend a lot of time developing their core values. Now, that's great. I'm not taking anything away from that. And I used to work at a technology company and was in the sales department, and we'd have these company-wide meetings. And I remember we went through what are the core values of this company. And we identified and we went, it was a weekend retreat, money was spent, food was brought in, all the breakout rooms, and we identified the core values. And then we went back to work and pretty much everything was the same. The core values didn't actually impact anything. And I began getting curious about this and looking at values and people talk about values. And then I had this realization, we all actually share the same values. We all value family. We all value freedom. We all value financial stability. We all value love, connection, trust, loyalty. There's a long list. But then I started looking, I said, does everybody have these? And then I made a list of my values, which is a long list. And then I made a list of the mafia's values. And this is in the book too. And I realized, wait a second, the mafia and I share the exact same values with very few exceptions. Now, some people are like, oh, Fletcher, what are you talking about? They don't. No, they value loyalty. They value financial stability. They value creativity. They value family, right? They value religion. Value per value. And some of them, they probably even value more because they're willing to do things that I'm not willing to do, right? So what I got when I got those lists side by side, I said, hold on a second. This can't be what everyone's actually talking about. And so I realized that these are simply indicators of preference, right? Because how many people, Pauline, do you know who value financial stability but are not financially stable, right? Or I used to value health and vitality. Health was really important, health and fitness. But was I healthy and fit? I was not. I was thin, but I wasn't healthy or fit, right? But I said, if you would have asked me, do I value? Absolutely. If you asked me, do you value honesty? Absolutely. But do I lie? I absolutely did. Okay. And I still would have said, but I value honesty. So what's going on here? Values are indicators of preference. They're important indicators of preference, but they don't move the needle, right? So when somebody says to me, oh, Fletcher, I'm single now and I want to get back into the dating world, but I want to find somebody who shares the same values that I do. Well, you didn't narrow down the dating pool. You opened it up to everybody because everybody shares your values, okay? What we're actually talking about, what people really want, if you really want to move the needle, what you're really looking for in a relationship is somebody who shares your same standards around those values. If you value health and fitness, do you have a standard that breathes life into the value, right? Somebody who has a high standard around health and fitness probably works out on a regular basis, probably is educated and informed about what it will fuel their body, right, in a good way. Or if somebody values financial stability, they probably have a standard around saving money on a regular basis, investing, right? It's the standards that breathe life into our values. And so, a word to all these companies who are spending money on all these value retreats. No. What are your standards around the values? Because your standards are going to move the needle or not.
Exactly. So when people are dating and someone tells the other person, your standards are too high for me, then that just says our values don't align.
Exactly.
And the same thing in the business world, the professional environment, it's the same thing. Do our values align? Are the people who are running the company and the people who are working in the company, are they meeting up on that level?
Yeah. And so the fastest way to, if you look at your standard, so for instance, if you can't describe what your standards are in an area of your life, for instance, like, let's take savings, for instance, like if you say, well, yeah, I value saving money, then my very next question is, what's your standard about saving money? And if you can't identify it, like for instance, in my checking account, I always have at least a $2,000 buffer, right? It's never going to go into that. But if for some reason it did, I have a $2,000, that's a standard, right? A standard is what you're willing to settle for. Okay. So it's what you're willing. A standard is, do you make your bed? I value a tidy bedroom. Okay. What are your standards around it? Do you make your bed every morning? Oh, no. I mean, I don't make it every morning. Okay. Well, you're willing to settle for an unmade bed. It's not good, bad, right, or wrong. We just want to get clear about what your standards are. Right. So one of our standards in our house, we get up, we immediately make the bed. It's a standard. It's what we're willing to settle for. Because why? Well, Fletcher, why do you have to do that? Well, it feels good. It feels good to walk into my bedroom and it's tidy, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a personal standard. That's not good, bad, right, or wrong, but it's an alignment with the value of having a tidy room. Okay. So if you can't verbalize your standards, we have standards everywhere. We got standards around how often we have sex. What do we eat? How often we have alcohol? There are standards everywhere. But what I encourage your audience to get present to is, can you articulate your standards? Not what you want, what's actually happening. And when you can do that, now you're stepping into radical responsibility for your life. And that's where things start to change dramatically. And that becomes a fun game.
And some people think change just gets harder or even impossible as we get older. What do you say to someone who's wondering if it's too late to rewire how they think or feel?
So I'm not a neuroscientist, but I read a lot about it. And the good news is we know now more than ever before, it is not too late. You can absolutely rewire your brain in certain areas of your life. Are you going to do it in every area? No. But if there is an area that you want to rewire, absolutely it's possible. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to adapt. And we now know how it does that. We know that a certain level of sleep is involved, and a lot of it happens during sleep. We know that the neuromodulators are involved for it. So it's absolutely possible. And for instance, I'm learning Spanish right now. And I've tried to learn Spanish many times in my life. And right now I'm actually doing it because I recommitted and I put things in place so that I can do it. And that's a real live example of creating new programming in your head, right? That information wasn't there before. Now it is. And now the brain is beginning to wire up a program around it so that it can actually be used. That's phenomenal. I started working out in a gym several years. Well, I guess it's been about maybe a little over 2 years ago. Never liked working out. Never did. I mean, I've been active and athletic and stuff, but like actually lifting weights, that seemed like the worst thing you could possibly do with your time. But I realized that as I was getting older, that my strength is going to be necessary for a part of maintaining my health and vitality. It's very important to me. So I made a commitment, and it was drudgery at first. And I was months into this. I'm like, gosh, am I ever going to start to like this? Am I ever going to develop that part of the circuitry in my brain that's like, is okay with it? It feels good, or can even enjoy it. Now, 2 years into it, I look forward to going to the gym. My brain knows what to expect. It's wired for this experience, right? And it's learning and adding more to it. So yes, so those are a couple easy things, examples of rewiring the brain. And I don't care how old you are, it's absolutely possible. My stepfather is 87. He sends to me daily articles he's reading about neuroscience, about biology, about the universe. I mean, it's never too late to gain more information and to begin applying and training your brain.
That is so cool. That is so
Yeah.
cool. And I've spent most of my career in some form of sales or customer service. And when you're in sales, they tell you that people buy from people they know, like, and trust.
Mm-hmm.
You've developed an approach to intentionally building trust, which is also so important in life and leadership. What does that look like in practice? And how can someone start building more trust in their business or, in their life or as a leader?
Mm-hmm. Love this question. So we want people to trust us, and we want to be able to trust people. So let's get curious about what needs to be in place for a person to trust you. And I've identified 3 things, and I'm not saying this is the right answer, but it seems to hold up pretty well. So I invite you to consider that 3 things need to be in place for trust. Number 1, a person needs to feel that they're heard before they're going to trust you. Okay. Now, so they really want the experience of being heard, not that you're just listening. They want the experience, like, gosh, you know what? she gets me. She actually hears me. She's really getting how it is for me. I'm having the experience of being heard, right? Mm-hmm. Really important. But can I have the experience of being heard and still not trust Pauline? Yeah, I can, right? I might be more inclined to trust her, but I could feel like, wow, she really gets how it is for me, but I still don't trust her. So what's the other thing? Well, if a person feels supported, they're way more inclined to trust. Okay. So, gosh, I really feel supported by Pauline. Yeah, she gets me, and I feel supported by her. She's demonstrated some things, so that's another element, another prong that has to be in place for trust. But I could feel supported, but still not trust you, right? I mean, maybe Pauline gave me a financial donation to a cause, that's support, but maybe she's got some ulterior motive. I don't know if you can trust Pauline, right? So, but what if I feel heard by Pauline, supported? Oh boy, now I'm way more inclined to trust her. But it's possible to have both of those and still not trust, because the third thing is the real linchpin of this. And that is when a person feels safe. When a person feels safe with you, they're going to trust you. When they feel safe, when they feel heard, and they feel supported, you've got that trifecta. Oh man, now a person is going to give you their trust solidly. So what I want to invite your listeners to hear, like, gosh, do I allow people the experience of feeling heard? Or am I always talking over them? Am I always interrupting? Am I forgetting to summarize what they've said? Do I allow people to feel heard? And do I allow people to feel supported? Do they feel like I'm contributing to them? Do they feel like I've got their back somehow? And safe. Do people feel safe with me? Or are they worried I'm going to gossip about them? Or, whatever, stab them in the back? No. When you have these 3 things, it's a solid bond of trust.
That's great. And so to piggyback on that, we're now hearing more about fear and anxiety being so huge for so many people.
Yeah.
What's 1 or 2 simple practices you recommend to deal with them on a daily basis, especially because so many people are dealing with overwhelm. They're overwhelmed by fear. They're overwhelmed by the anxiety and the worry. So what would you recommend for people that they can do to deal with those feelings?
Thank you for asking this. This is such an important one because anxiety, depression, which anxiety can lead into depression, all of this stuff leads to massive suffering. And, I was reading this great book. I can't remember the author right now, but The Body Keeps the Score. It's a very well-known book. But they talk about, for instance, like women, mothers, if they have depression, that their children, particularly girls, are even way more higher or likely to have depression growing up too. I mean, it's just like, this is such an important topic. So two things. First of all, we want to really get this. What's at the core of anxiety? What's at the center, the very center of anxiety? It's a story. There is some story that your brain, the programming of your brain is constantly fixed. And because it's focused on that story, the brain has no choice. It must create the emotion that correlates with the story. So, yeah, lots of cortisol, lots of adrenaline, right? You're going to feel like you're crawling out of your skin. So, because your brain doesn't have a choice. Your brain doesn't care about you. It doesn't say, oh, Pauline, don't focus on that story. No, it just says, oh, that's the story we're going to focus on. Great. I got a cocktail mixture of chemicals that is going to match that, and you're going to feel anxious. Okay. So we have to really, whether it's you work with a coach or go see a therapist or whatever, you've got to take the time and prioritize the time to get to uncover what those stories are. The stories are at the core of your anxiety. Once you identify them, you can set up a contrary story to that, set up an empowering story, right? And you're going to repeat that over and over and over again. People say, oh, Fletcher, what, you're talking about incantations and mantras? Yeah, I am. Because that's what we do all day long, right? We're constantly making statements that either empower or disempower. And then there's a chemical reaction that goes along with it. So we're rewriting the story. So we don't carry around this story of anxiety, but we carry around a story of hope, right? Of optimism, of possibility, right? We start carrying around a story and focusing on a story of kindness, of openness, of willingness. And these stories, ultimately what we're doing through this is we're going from a deregulated nervous system to a regulated nervous system. And then of course there's all the very well-known exercises. We're going to do some breathing, right? We're going to really intentionally take time to breathe. And and go online. There's 1,000 things online about, there's a billion things online about breathing, right? Why? Because it's actually scientifically based. It works on helping to regulate the nervous system. Then you're going to do some journaling. You're going to do all the work around mindfulness. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, here we go, mindfulness. Gosh, yes, because it works. It actually works. We're just not practiced at it. This is the practice of feeling good. It requires effort. It requires reflection. It requires breathing. And ultimately, at the very, very core, it requires a new feel good, empowering story.
That really leads into what I also had these thoughts about empowerment and how you make the case that it doesn't come from the outside. It's something we can actually generate ourselves.
Yes.
So where does that sense of power come from?
Oh.
How can someone start strengthening that muscle?
I love it. So this is something that's not talked about very often. And so thank you for asking it. If you want to feel more empowered in your life, there is only one way to do it, because we only feel empowerment when we take responsibility for our commitments. Okay. I'm going to say that again, because this is so key. If you want to feel more empowered in your life, begin taking responsibility for your commitments. Now, let's look at the opposite. There were lots of times in my life when I did not take responsibility for my commitments. And how did I feel? Not empowered, disempowered. I felt jealous. I felt envious. I wanted to blame because I wasn't taking responsibility for my commitments. Okay. I wanted the easy road. I was masterful at blaming. Okay. And what does it mean to take responsibility for your commitments? It means to be your word. When you say you're going to do something, you actually take efforts in that direction. And I was incredibly practiced at breaking my word. My word meant nothing to me, and it certainly didn't mean much to the people in my life. And that's pretty sad, but that's the fact. If you said, Fletcher, hey, we're having dinner at 6, and I say, oh, great, I'll be there. 6:20, 6:25, 6:30, Fletcher might show up. Hey, I thought, dinner's at 6. Oh, what's the big deal? I'm here. I know, but you said you'd be here at 6. Well, what's the big deal? I just didn't have a concept of being my word. And therefore I felt disempowered and was not producing the results that I wanted, because if you want to produce the results, you have to show up powerfully in your life. So want more empowerment, take responsibility. Now, some people are practiced at not making any commitments so they don't have to take responsibility, right? So how do you begin to feel more empowered? Make a small commitment for which you can take responsibility. I'm going to make my bed tomorrow morning after I get up. You make a commitment, and then you get into action around it. Now, Fletcher, that's not a very big deal. No, it's not, because I'm a big believer in baby steps. Make it easy. Set yourself up for success. Say you're going to do the smallest of things and then do it. And then immediately after you do it, remember, this brings us back to Cesar Millan, reward that behavior. Whoa, I just did that. That felt good. Ooh, I was being my word. Ooh. And how are you going to feel? You're going to actually feel good and empowered. Why? Because I did what I said. I kept my word to myself. And that's the biggest one, keeping your word to yourself. Many of us set our alarms. And then the first thing that we do when the alarm goes off is we hit snooze, beep, and we snooze. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you said you were going to get up at 5:30 and the first thing you did was hit snooze, the first thing you did was to break your word at the beginning of the day. Now, if you say, oh, you know what, I'm going to set for 5:30 and then I'm going to snooze once, great, do that. Now you've been your word. Start off with being your word. And that's how you begin to take those baby steps towards feeling more empowered.
That's so great. I know you've coached so many people over the years, and you've seen lots of success stories. Do you want to share a success story of someone that you coached that you've helped to make a change in their life?
Yeah, you bet. I mention this one frequently on shows just because it was one of the most amazing transformations I've ever seen. My wife and I used to host a weekend seminar called Diabetes Smackdown, the ultimate solution. And it was for people who had type 2 diabetes or who were at risk for type 2 diabetes. And these people who were coming were kind of at the end of their rope. They'd tried everything. They tried all the diets, the pills, the medications. And we were not there giving any exercise advice. We're not giving any very little nutritional advice. It was all a mindset weekend. And these people had tried everything. And the most common statement they would say is, Fletcher, I already know what I should be doing. I just don't know why I can't get myself to do the things I know I should be doing, right? And so that's what we were addressing. We were addressing that very statement. Why can't I get myself to do the things I know I should be doing? Well, these 3 women that I'm thinking of, they went through the entire weekend course, and then they went on to do about 9 months of group coaching with me. And some of them were on a lot of medication. Some of them were carrying a lot of more weight that they wanted to carry, more than they wanted to carry. They were depressed. I mean, it was not a good situation for them. They were not happy. They were in a lot of suffering. Well, a year later, after they had gone through the training, those 3 women completed their first ever triathlon. And 2 of them were in their 60s and 1 of them was 70 years old. And they committed, and I did not ask them to do this, nothing. See, new actions come from new emotional states. And they decided, we're going to do this. We're going to make that commitment so that we can raise our level of empowerment. And they'd never done anything like this. It had never been on their bucket list. They never saw themselves doing this. This is what can happen when we change our emotional state and begin to work into a life of empowerment. And I got to be there on that day and watch all three of them cross that finish line. One of them was dead last, and it was the best thing ever. And one of the things I said, she said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was last. I was like, Terry, that means you were out there longer than anyone, working your ass off more than anyone, right? You did it. And that changed their lives.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, it changed how they saw themselves. It changed what they knew was possible for them, not to mention coming off all these medications that they were on. And what was the difference maker? The story. They radically changed the story about what was possible for their lives.
That's so exciting to hear about that amazing transformation.
Yeah.
Finally, Fletcher, please share how people can connect with you.
Yeah, you bet. You can go to FletcherEllingson.com or thepracticeoffeelinggood.com. You can go to Amazon and get a copy of my book, The Practice of Feeling Good. You can email me at Fletcher@FletcherEllingson.com and also connect with me on Facebook. I'm still probably the most active there. I don't do a lot of social media, but that's where I'm most active on. So look me up on Facebook, Fletcher Ellingson. And yeah, I'd love to connect with you. And and I should say, if anyone listening to this wants to get a copy of my book for free, just email me, be the first listener to email me and reference the Pauline Chilton podcast show and give me your address and I'll send you a free copy of my book.
Great. I'll make sure to put the links in the description so that people can find them.
And before we leave, Pauline, I just want to publicly acknowledge you and thank you for being a source of kindness and contribution in this world, because you are working towards putting out intent, which ultimately lessens the suffering and builds empowerment. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's a wrap on this Feel Good episode with Fletcher Ellingson. If you loved what you heard and you want to go deeper, be sure to connect with Fletcher at FletcherEllingson.com. Whether you're looking for a powerful speaker, a workshop leader, or someone to help your team shift into a higher gear, Fletcher brings the kind of transformational insight that creates lasting change. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on the Pauline Chilton Show YouTube channel. We've got more incredible conversations coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Exciting news. We'll be hosting in-person events right here in the Tampa Bay area. If you want to be a part of this growing, purpose-driven community, head over to thepaulineshow.com, join our email list, and follow us on social media so you can stay in the loop. Until next time, keep feeling good, keep showing up, and keep saying yes to the life you want.